Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon Podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming to you from the Underworld North Studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Ahsoka Acolyte Skeleton Crew, this Ray film, the James Mangold film. I can say all those words again. Although I've been saying those words already, but still.
Yeah. Definitely excited to be able to talk about on-screen stuff, screen stories, joining the podcast, Harriet. I get to say that again. But first, we'll get to that in a second. This week, we are talking about Jedi and Republic, Saber and Senate, Altar and Throne. We have talked about that relationship quite a bit in the past, but this time we dive into looking at the purported spiritual and political leaders of the galaxy and the key moments in that centuries-long dance. Execute Order EOC deep dive. Looking forward to it. Here we go. First off, before we do that, let's get some plugs out of the way. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Ion Cannon Pod. I'm getting back on Threads, so I should get back on the EOC Threads as well. Done a few things on Instagram. Here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got memberships, we got super chats. We got all that fun stuff. Of course, all the Underworld socials as well. We got Discord, the Discord server. Follow us for conversations, join us for conversations and events. Joel, we want to talk about what events have happened recently and coming up.
Yes, we played Fortnite last Friday because the original map is back on. We are not sure if we're going to have an event the week after next because the week after next is American Thanksgiving. And that means a lot of people are probably going to be out for the week. So we are unsure. We have not made an official decision as of yet. We'll get back to everybody as soon as possible. Just to know, because American Thanksgiving and people are going to be out and not wanting to play games.
I should know this. Is that Thursday or Friday?
Thursday, but that doesn't mean
Black
Friday
is the Friday.
Yeah.
And then people are usually off and seeing family and whatnot. Okay. That makes sense. It makes sense to me, Thanksgiving Monday. I was in New York, Thanksgiving Monday, so Thanksgiving Thursday, Black Friday. We get Black Friday sales here too, just because integrated economy.
Capitalism.
That capitalism, integrated economy. Speaking of integrated economy, speaking of Thursdays, engage the tractor beam. Chris Abbott and I, most Thursdays, 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Thursdays. I said Thursdays a lot. Thursdays. Can never get a hang of Thursdays. Arthur Dent. Usually got our comic book reviews. Comics come out Wednesday. We reviewed them Thursday. We also throw in the Insider Short Stories. This past Thursday, we went through 5 stories, 4 of them High Republic stories, the beginning of Phase 3, kicking that off. And for all our efforts, for all our reward, we're not actually doing Earth Tractor Beam this Thursday, but stay tuned, keep an eye out. I have a work thing all day, so figure just give us a break. We'll take a break for this week. But yeah, if you want to go back to see our thoughts on the first 4 stories to begin the High Republic Phase 3, that's the Insider Short, that's Shadows of Starlight 1 and 2, and High Republic, like the Marvel High Republic number 1. Check that out right here on the Underworld channel, by the way. So it's Underworld YouTube channel, where you can get everything. You can get Iron Cannon, you can get Tractor Beam, you can get Iron Cannon on Spotify and Apple Podcast as well. I have to catch up and do all the Tractor Beam episodes. Throw that up on the audio feed. I've yet to do that, but if audio is your speed, check those out. Speaking of which, I gotta do one more bit of a plug on the strike is over. The strike is over. So that means the flagship podcast has come back, and that's every Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. And you probably already know that. If you have, if you followed the flagship pod, Star Wars Underworld, and you've subscribed and you're here because Iron Cannon, Paper Cannon, who's doing the books and comics, at least giving more attention to that. Welcome to the Iron Cannon podcast. I'm Matthew and Joel, and then Tractor Beams, Chris and me. Chris and I, we tend to shine a spotlight, and all through the strike, we decided to continue shining a spotlight on these amazing paper stories that are still with us and still very much part of, integrated into the Star Wars universe, the Star Wars world, and these Star Wars characters that we know and love. And so it's been great to continue that, and we're going to keep going I don't know, Joel. I don't know if we have any more breaks planned coming up. Maybe one day we'll take a break, but for now, yeah, keep the momentum up. As far as we got a few ideas for episodes coming up down the pipeline. I will get to a bit of thing with the flagship pod in a second, but first off, prior to that, what's your week in Star Wars?
So yeah, my week of Star Wars was coming across a very interesting take on the High Republic that I never considered. So this was from the Jedi Council forums. There was a big kind of, well, not big, well, debate of like, how connected to the prequels this thing was going to be. Back and forth, back and forth. There are a few little things like one person said, regarding the Sith, if the Nile had started their activity by the time of Phantom Menace, he would have had his empire a lot sooner. And to this person, the major part of the High Republic is that the Jedi are, apart from the prequel version, either permitting the Nile to change them would be a sad cleaving to Star Wars strategy tendency. And there's a lot of back and forth on whether it should, shouldn't. They think maybe it should have been further back to keep it away from the prequel setting, blah, blah, blah. All that good stuff. But then this part came in, which I really liked because I think this was the most pointed part of this discussion, where someone said, and I quote, "I don't see it as being the High Republic's job to show why the Jedi in the prequels are the way they are. What I see the High Republic as being is about why the rebellion exists centuries later. To restoring the Republic seen in the prequels is pointless. So there has to be something else, something better to look to. I think it's also to be, in effect, an anti-tragedy story. Doing a load of prequel links tends to undermine this." So I actually really like that. Get a drink of water. You talk too fast. I actually really like that particular take on the High Republic because, yeah, if in canon it's called the Alliance to Restore the Republic, which I know people criticize anyway, but for other reasons, like, yeah, why does Mon Mothma, Akbar, even Leia, to an extent, want to restore this republic in the first place? It ain't the Alliance to burn down the Empire. That comes later. So what is it about this republic that's like they think is worth fighting for? And I think maybe, yeah, I think seeing the High Republic as the high point, like, yeah, this was something worth fighting for and restoring. So yeah, I never kind of thought about it that way, but like, yeah, people like Akbar probably were alive in the final years of that High Republic era, so they probably have some good times there. Mothma probably studied a lot under that, or not. Well, he wouldn't have been born by then. It's like he probably been inspired by that. So yeah, I just thought that was like very much a good point raised during this kind of back and forth debate about how close to the prequels the High Republic should be, and I just thought I'd point that out because, like, oh, that's a very interesting viewpoint there. So, as High Republic talkers, I thought I'd just bring that particular point across.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. I'm all you know what I think about either or statements. That this is the point and this is not the point. And I'll get to kind of what I think about history, the point about history in a second. But yeah, it is an interesting to say what one of the aspects of it, one of the reasons for it. And one of the things that we see in Charles Soule's comic, the Star Wars ongoing comic, is he's having Kes Dameron and Starlight Squadron as being inspired by this historical era, this historical republic, and inspired by the history that you would know in the real world. Charles Soule is part of laying down, so you can insert that. But in universe, yeah, it's an interesting note to say there was this time where the government on Coruscant and the society that it sought to build was worth maintaining, was worth fighting for, is worth hoping for again. It doesn't have to be on Coruscant, but for the number of centuries, I think it can do both. It can do both things. I'm more interested in the way it shows how it leads to Order 66, the way it shows, and we're going to get to that later on in this episode. But that's the thing I'm more interested because I'm a prequelist and I'm all about those narratives of decline and trying to explain decline. But it's definitely an interesting insight and one that does fit with what we've seen in other stories.
I mean, we'll certainly find out by the end of Phase 3 if this was supposed to explain a narrative decline or not. Because that's definitely the person who's very against it was like, he doesn't think this is a tragedy. and a narrative of decline.
Yeah.
So we'll find out in phase
I-
3, which is
Maybe we might not, right? That's the thing. We might not find out anything because it's set 200 years before. How do they know? We might find out more in John Jackson Miller's Living Force
or Acolyte.
or in The Acolyte, but I think even more specifically in John Jackson Miller's Living Force, because those at New York Comic Con, he said explicitly, there are these Jedi who remember the good old days, and this is more of a negative spin on it. But remember the good old days where things were really great, and the Republic and the Jedi were a well-oiled machine together, and the Jedi themselves were at their height, really at the height of their powers. And yeah, to see how they feel about this decline, how they feel about what they've allowed happen, in part, I think, and I've said this, just develop the habit of retreating back to Coruscant whenever they're in trouble. And the fact that we get pushed back. But yeah, it's a point taken. It's a great insight. Again, I won't say anything on nothing, but great insight as to, that's certainly true. And this is what I'm getting at with bringing up the Charles Soule's ongoing comment. How members of the Rebel Alliance would look back to the High Republic, right? There are parallels through history where we look back. This is the tricky thing about a golden age. There's ever such thing as a golden age. But a golden age isn't necessarily an actual historical event. It's a symbol for what we could become. And it's interesting. I don't know if you have any more things to say about that.
I'm just kind of curious. I guess we'll find out in phase 3. That's the only answer I have.
So anyway, my week in Star Wars, is similar to all this conversation. On Thursday night on the getting back into the thing of things here on the flagship podcast, the Star Wars Underworld podcast. Dom was able to share his San Diego Comic Con interview with team members of Team Luminous, and he released that as a standalone today. You can find that link in the description below. If you're watching this after the fact, feel free to go there and come back and watch watch my comments on it. But it was a really great interview. Again, it was from a few months ago, from the summer, because of the strike and everything. But there's always something to be said for non-spoilery comments and non-spoiler interviews. I thought the thing that really stuck out to me in that interview was, again, Charles Soule talking about how he was confirming, in a way, my theory about how they, it's the stories we have in the publishing initiative are maybe 1 or 2 years, 3 years, the span. But they're telling the most historically significant moments of this time period and of how things affect the future. And that is conscious, that is built in. We don't know from the brief conversation we just had. We don't know what the ultimate effect is, except that we do know that they have the habit of being in cahoots with the Republic so tightly and so trying to be defended by the Republic and be a part of the Republic, that they become slaves to the Republic and then executed by the Republic effectively. But it's
Sorry, microphone problems. I keep getting sounding fake.
Trying to deal with different things here.
You sounded better earlier. Like you sounded better just a while ago.
Let's see.
There we go.
We go. Turn the gain up. Okay, so there we go. We're good.
I can hear.
Yeah, I can hear. I can talk. I can speak good English. Yeah, and again, just to reiterate, I think so. There is a reason why they chose 200 years, and they said it's sufficiently further back, but also close enough. And that's the point. It is close enough, so that you could plausibly say these events affect other things. And the real world example I go to is, in the early 19th century, the Napoleonic Wars, and the War of 1812, the Napoleonic Wars, and the revolutions, the American French Revolution, really bringing in this wave of enlightenment, this end of this era of monarchies, the end of the divine right as at its height, and then we have these republics, and then the republics turn into empires eventually. But yeah, the effect of having, we can point back, we can say directly our current age, and both the good of democracy, the not so good of neoliberal economics. Its origins are in events in that time period, and so yeah, that is plausible to say. Okay, maybe not in a different way, um, with the Jedi and the Republic, but I mean, yeah, I could talk about the way the rise of secularism, and there are good things about secularism. I think there are some concerning things about how do I want to say this, uh, nobody can have faith commitments, and those faith commitments can't inform anything, and that's not what pluralism is. And pluralism is having multiple faith commitments, being able to be present in society and informing the common good. And and so we can say that it's kind of where I go, and that's with Order 66 to some extent. And I don't want to be that extreme about it. I'm happy to live in Canada and in our pluralist secular society. It's fine. But there is this thing, at least in terms of the time, the linear time. 200 years is about right, and it fits with our world now. And yeah, it's and we'll see. I mean, who knows what's going to happen 200 years after 9/11? Who knows how that has affected things? It's already affected things so deeply now. So that's, yeah, just continue to think about history. We're going to keep talking about history throughout this episode because it's something. Yeah, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about Star Wars. It's history. Anyway, have you seen the interview, Joel? And what do you think?
I've seen a bit of. I didn't watch the whole thing, so nah. But yeah, it is kind of funny though. It's sort of like back to kind of my week of Star Wars. That's sort of the contention of you really see the centuries, and then the other person's like, no, I think you're underestimating the centuries, and it's like kind of like the two kind of parallel thinking can exist at the same time. Which I guess that's debate for you. But keep twerking on that thing a little bit. Like it's good, but still kind of iffy, that mic. Let us know in the comments, people, how the mic's coming out for you.
Yeah, I'm also curious because how it sounds.
That's a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got nothing. That interview was really cool. So,
sure.
High Republic, weirdly, there seems so much of it, but yet we've only scratched really the surface of 1,000 of, I don't know what the total amount of years is for the entire High Republic. 5, 6, 7, 8, 100 years. Of story, but we only really scratched the surface. But yeah, fun.
I mean, it's the era versus the initiative.
Oh yeah.
All right, the moment we've been waiting for. We've been waiting months for. Eyes on screen, no question marks, just exclamation marks. No question marks. The strike is over, and thankfully, the actors got a deal that they can live with for the next few years. Thankfully, AI. There's some protections for AI, some like a streaming bonus, participation bonus. So again, it's not everything they wanted, but hopefully it's something they can live with, and they're gonna approve the deal as best they can. So which means Ahsoka, the show.
Ahsoka, the series.
Yeah. First of all, how's my mic now? Just checking the mic.
I mean, I can hear you. It just sounds like you're kind of fuzzy. I kind of got that weird static.
Maybe this is better. I don't know. We're trying to figure this out.
Yeah, I can get a little better from your far away.
So I'll relax more. Just gotta relax more. There we go.
Too much relaxing. Too much relaxing.
Yeah, Ahsoka. What was your okay? We have a lot to go through, so we're gonna do a full Ahsoka episode definitely coming up, and this show gave us lots to talk about, lots to think about. Lots to chat about in the Discord, chat about privately, in group chats and in Facebook, in Messenger chats and whatnot. But now on the flagship, they were able to chat about it. They're going to keep chatting about it. So join the podcast area, Joel. What's one favorite thing about Ahsoka that's
I mean, what's there to talk about? There's so much. The Return of Rebels, Ahsoka, Anakin. What could I talk about? I'm gonna talk about Thrawn.
Who?
I know that guy. Okay, I want to talk about. I keep going about Thrawn the whole shebang later, but I'm going to talk about one particular scene because I wanted to at least narrow it down as quick best I can. I really love the scene where Thrawn and Sabine confront each other for the only time in the show. There's just something really cool about that moment, and I think I love the moment where like Thrawn just kind of slowly gets into Sabine's face when he finds out like what Sabine did and just goes, "You can't put the fate of your galaxy on that belief." And Sabine's like, "Yeah, well, that's something you don't think you'd understand." And Thrawn just kind of steps back and goes, "Perhaps not." It's like, I feel like Sabine just gave the power of friendship over Imperial tactics kind of vibe, and Thrawn's like, maybe I don't understand, but I don't really care. I just want to escape. I don't know. There's something about that kind of dichotomy of like cold, calculating, tactical. Everyone's an asset. Thrawn versus Sabine's. No, I'm here to get Ezra out of here because that's what I care about more. Yeah, maybe logically this might hurt, but like my friends are my power kind of vibe. And I just really just like that one particular moment. And obviously Lars Mikkelsen is amazing and he's so cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
just like the Purgle.
oh, you're faded again. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'm trying to figure this out. Just like the Purgle, just like the Bendu. You know, wherever Thrawn, probably the Night Sisters to some extent. What he doesn't understand ends up being his undoing, and the extent to which he can overcome that lack of understanding, then becomes his ability to overcome the circumstance. He does get away. He does succeed at the end. The season.
But Ezra makes it back with him, so.
Ezra makes it back with him, and so is that. But then Ahsoka and Sabine restrain him. But yeah, the power of the bond that it continues to be his undoing. It's going to continue to be his undoing, unless there's again some sort of conversion. Probably.
I don't think if he's working with dark evil witches on Dathomir, I think he's all in on the evil.
Yeah, there's only one very artful way I think his story's going to go now that we've seen him on screen. So very artful. It's going to be artful. I know that, but I trust Dave Filoni. I mean, talking from Rook, he's not going to be the one to stab him in the back or shoot him in the back, but still, it'll be good. Great shot of great fan edits of Lars in the costume sitting back smoking, and then interesting discourse around smoking and how it's bad for you, but the whole thing, him smoking, and then the fan edits of him on the throne, chilling, or at least on the bridge of the Chimera, whatever, is just chilling there. That's So I'll jump into mine. The one thing I loved wearing this T-shirt, for multiple reasons, and I don't mean, the thing I don't love is specifically just the flashbacks themselves, but it's fan service, but it's not. It's still character. Those moments in episode 5.
It's both. I like to think.
It's both, but yeah, and there I go with making neither or myself. But it was amazing to see. Love seeing Anakin Hayden in live action in the Clone Wars armor. Love seeing Ariana Greenblatt having the year of her life. Between Barbie and that movie with Adam Driver, and now this, having a great time. All of it serves Ahsoka in this time period, and that's what's so brilliant, so disciplined and focused about what Dave did in that episode, what Dave did throughout the season, is to say, yeah, we know how much you love Clone Wars. Yeah, we know how much you love Rebels. Here is their story going forward, and to say, yeah, we don't know how much you love both. We're going to give you the implications of both, and Ahsoka reflecting on her own failures, and how, and also just how her own training was so much in war when it didn't need to be. It was how war is a tragedy, and the implications of that on children. I mean, we're seeing the darkest implications of that in the real world right now. But yeah, I mean, imagine, volunteer. I don't know. I don't want to go into this too much, but
I wouldn't.
To what extent are Padawans child soldier? Not really, but it's a more accepted kind of thing. But to say that that meant she, I mean, she was still able to be playful, and I love how, even especially after that episode, after those moments, the playful, uh, kind of joyful Ahsoka actually comes back as she's reckoned with her role in Anakin's fall and abandoning him, and how she, she isn't responsible for it. Kind of similar, a great parallel to Kenobi. So, I mean, yeah, that just that episode right there. It made Ahsoka my favorite live action Star Wars. Period. Without exception, that episode is my favorite live action episode. Period. Yes, the Jack Black Lizard episode of Mandalorian. I love that one, but yeah, this one, that moment was just above and beyond and everything I want in the Star Wars. Again, I love Clone Wars. It's my favorite series, period, and because of everything it deals with and because of the era. But it shows us the implications on her this episode. So, yeah, kudos to Filoni and to everyone, to Rosario and Ariana and Hayden and everyone involved for putting together a brilliant episode. Even Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Natasha Liverdizo and everyone involved. It was uh, really well done show.
Well, I just have to say, and now I get to reveal my prop, even though I'm going to use this for other things later. I got here the Essential Guide to Warfare. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about this right now, they did it first.
Yes. There we go.
Ahsoka, Anakin in Clone Wars armor, and kind of a live-action photorealistic Ahsoka.
That's even before the
this was 2012.
So it's well before the Chrono Alliance. Wow.
Yeah, this was Legends material. But yeah, I just wanted to share that because y'all have to look at it. But no, that was a great moment. That was a great episode. I love how Anakin is such a douche, but he's our douche.
Like in terms of the Sith flashback, or just the
no, just in terms of his personality, he's kind of still got that douchey energy, but I love it.
Or just I don't care. Is how I deal.
Yeah. I mean, I love how he's just kind of very I like kind of like very pokey Ahsoka. It's like, come on, fight me, kick my butt, kick your butt. You don't. Very hardcore teaching method still, even in death. But no, that was a great episode. Really fun. They actually got the armor and the hair just perfect. I didn't think they'd ever do it correctly in live action. It's like, oh god, it's actually really good. So yeah. Great episode all around. Excited to do the entire breakdown soon.
That's another thing I'll say is I'd hoped I'd finally get to the top of Uncanny Plateau, and I was there. I didn't. It wasn't a climb. It was already there from the beginning. Maybe it's because I was willing to do it going in, and that's a lesson for all you folks. There's a certain Marvel film called The Marvels out, and if you go in there, you're like, ew, it's a movie about 3 women. You may not like it. If you go in there saying, "Oh yeah, I'm open for a fun, interesting take on the Marvel Universe," yeah, you might love it. I love that one. So, yeah, Uncanny Plateau, I'm there. I'm fine. I'm good. All 3 of these characters were great to me. No problem. So, yeah. Anyway, if any further thoughts there, we're gonna save it for next week.
Not even for next week.
I don't know when we're going to talk about this show, but save it for whenever we do. Okay, a bit of news before we dive in. There's some comics news. Revelations one shot that comes out December 20th. This is first Revelation. I'll bring up the Virgin cover by Rod Rice here. This is the Virgin version of the cover. The direct edition cover has the title and has different things. Virgin meaning no writing and no text on it, and I love those. They're just showcasing the art. And I'm bringing this up because we also have some story, the story details. And I'll bring that up then too, and I'll bring this cover back in a minute. But first of all, I don't know how well you can see that. So we have this is just the inside, the credits basically, and so I'll go through these. And so what Revelations is, it's always Revelation number 1 it had some sort of interconnected story. What it really did is set up everything coming up in the next year.
The big commercial.
Yeah, a big commercial, but also it's just a big prequel. It's just a big, like, it's closer to an issue number 0, if you will, somewhere between an issue number 0 and like an annual, but not quite. It really does set up. It doesn't, because it's their standalone stories, or they're their own stories that preview where all these other books are going, including Mace Windu and Mace Windu and Jango Fett, which I haven't started yet. And so, yeah, and some other stories that are coming to an end, hopefully, possibly. Hopefully, in that's where the narrative arc of these need to go. So I'll just list these through, and I'll say, okay, so we have the ongoing, which also A Trick of the Mind, Dr. Aphra, Tall Tales by Alyssa Wong and Company, Jango Fett, Stolen Hope by Ethan Sachs, Mace Windu Showdown at the Ocean's Bottom, like Ocean, almost like Ocean's 12 by Mark Bernardin. That's also Mace Windu. That's gonna be a new comic. Darth Vader, Tool of the Empire by Greg Pak, High Republic, All the Republic by Kevin Scott, Jabba the Hutt, Duel of the Reprobates, like Good Run the Duel of the Fates by Mark Guggenheim. And yeah, so that comes out December 20th. And here's the curious thing. Here's the weird thing is some of these we can easily tell. Okay, so the Jabba story. The Kiev story, the High Republic story is the Kiev story. Vader, which is Luke or Leia, the ongoing one. Lando, the ongoing one. Obviously, the Mace one is the Mace one. This hooded figure at the bottom. Who is that? And what story is Thrawn in? We don't know. It's this weird mystery.
I think Thrawn's supposed to be the Thrawn adaptation that they're going to do. I think
but that's not in any of these.
Oh, okay.
So, who knows? I mean, that could be part of Tool of the Empire. I mean, there could be multiple characters of these in each of these stories. That's also possible.
Well, Thrawn is a tool of the Empire.
Yeah, it's possible, but you'd think he'd get his own kind of thing. Maybe it's a bit of a interestingly thought there. Then Tool of the Empire, that might be a bit of a prequel to Throne Alliances to some extent. Also, like both. I don't know if that makes sense with the timeline. That doesn't make sense with the timeline. But unless it's set different, I don't know. But I mean, well, when it's Throne Alliances, that's still set before. It's still set before.
It's after season 3 of Rebels.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe Tool of the Empire is just set before. Maybe the Vader comic is going to that time period. I don't know. Probably not. But it's just curious that we don't have these 1-to-1. I was expecting these 1-to-1 correlation, and we don't have that. So I don't know if you have any more thoughts on this.
No, not really. I'm just looking forward to it.
It should be good, and drumming up your curiosity. Comics are there is. So I'd say Star Wars comics right now are as good because they've always been, especially with Dark Droids. Dark Droids is doing so well. And hey, High Republic Phase 3, off to a great start with number 1. So give me more Kiev. Always up for more Kiev stories. You all know how I feel about Kiev, Master Kiev Trennis. So yeah, so there's that. Okay, speaking of Republic and Jedi and whatnot, and me needing a break with my voice. Joel, tell us about key moments in the Jedi and Republic relationship.
Yes, and maybe we keep adjusting your mic while I do more of the talking. Sure. All right, so we're going to talk about today we're going to go over a summary of the Jedi and the Republic, two forces that have always been together for over 1,000 generations. The Jedi Knights have been the guardians of peace and justice of the old Republic for the dark time, for the Empire. But before we do that, I thought we'd start a foundation by reading a quote from one Mr. George Lucas on what he considers to be the key of the Jedi Republic relationship before I start going over some stuff. So, Mr. George says, they're not like that kind of cops who catch murderers. They're warrior monks who keep peace in the universe without resorting to violence. The Trade Federation is in dispute with Naboo. We talk about Phantom Menace. So the Jedi are ambassadors who talk to both sides and convince them to resolve their differences and not go to war. If they do have to use violence, they will, but they are diplomats at the highest level. They've got the power to send the whole force of the Republic, which is 100,000 systems, So if you don't behave, they can bring you up front to the Senate. They'll cut off your knees politically. They're like police officers. As the situation develops, Clone Wars, they are recruited into the army and they become generals. They're not generals. They don't kill people. They don't fight. They're supposed to be ambassadors. So that was the latest George Lucas quote from the 2020 novel prequel archives. So I just thought I'd start there before I kind of get into the big stuff. All right. So the thing about the history of the Jedi and the Republic is we know some stuff for canon, but we don't know stuff for everything. So I'm going to use a little bit of Legends lore here. I want to thank both my friend Red Leader Antilles, if he's listening, who gave me a little bit of intro thanks to the Essential Guide to Warfare, which is my prop.
I should read that book.
Yeah. Really good, really good. By Mr. Jason Fry and art and was Paul R. Uquat. I'm sorry if you're getting there. With a little bit of reading here. So to get us started, the first thing we gotta know is so in the ancient times it's gonna be mostly legend stuff, but we can probably just assume more or less that's how canon goes as well. The Jedi and the Republics do start as separate organizations for a long time. The Republic develops into the core, and the sort of the Jedi. The Jedi eventually ditch the core to go to go to Ossus, which is a little bit more in the Outer Rim. As the Republic begins to expand, bunch of wars and stuff happens. The ancient past is very confusing. Not a war with the Tyon, with something called the Tyon, do the Jedi begin to get back into the game. To read passage 13, war was coming, and no one in the Republic seemed to see it, despite warning from another mysterious society living far from the core. The Jedi Order had left its original home in the Deep Core centuries before setting up on a green world the Taiwanese called Idux, but they themselves called Ossus. Except during their brief war with the Legion of Leto, few in the core had given much thought to the Jedi since their departure, and fewer had guessed that they were the young Republic's secret defenders working to check the Hutt schemes and keep the Taiwanese divided. Now strange warriors with glowing swords appeared in the core, warning of war, but to little avail. And basically, yeah, that's like the first big time the Jedi and the Republic get together. The Jedi though start having a little bit of with the Republic when they let's see, down the notes when they decide to sterilize an entire planet. And then they're like, nope, we're out of here. But then once
the Republic tried to do that?
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
And then eventually, when the Republic years later decided to give up their military, the Jedi are like, okay, we feel morally obligated to help you guys again. So it starts off a bit rocky, and the Jedi are very much like, we'll help you as long as you're a moral cause. And once you only start doing immoral things, then we're going to be like, nope, we're out of here. So that's the early stuff of the Jedi origins. Then the next big one would probably be the Great Hyperspace War, which is when the Sith Empire strikes for the first time against the Republic proper. Obviously, before then, a little context, of course, you get the Great Schism, when the Dark Jedi and the Jedi split, and the Jedi kick the Dark Jedi out. So that kind of brings the Republic and Jedi together for that. Then pretty much Sith Wars happen, all sorts of Sith Wars, like with Revan, Vitiate, all that stuff. I would say the Mandalorian Jedi Civil War was when the Jedi kind of lost their way and they came back. I'm kind of going over this stuff.
Yeah,
it's all kind of smushed together. But here's the one I'll get to, which I think, Matthew, you'll be the most interested in, which is the new Sith Wars around 2000 BBY. I'm gonna get my thing here. So this is another Sith war happens. The Jedi split again. The Sith Empire rises again. This happens a lot, people. This is kind of a cycle. We have a cycle here. Okay, so for this one, the army, and this is when things get really bad. This is pretty much the equivalent of the Dark Ages. So Republic's not in good straits, and then the Jedi begin to form the Army of Light. This is from Essential Guide to Warfare, page 42.
And when are we talking about? When in the timeline is this?
This is like around like a 2000 BBY, 1000 BBY.
Okay.
In that kind of vague area.
Okay, so before Rusan.
Before the High Republic. The Army of Light is legendary as the last great Jedi host of the Ancient Republic. Mustered by Lord Hoth in the closing campaign of the New Sith Wars, but the origin of this unique fighting force began to take shape several centuries before. Gotta drink some water. There we
We're
go.
the hydration podcast, guys. We're
Yes.
very ironic in that way.
Drink your water. It's good for you.
Yeah.
By the beginning of the New Sith Wars, the Republic has endured centuries of turmoil. Sith and Separatist forces, not the Separatists, just Separatist is the generic term,
Sure.
has gained control of the Rim and pushed the core world, while corrupt mega corporations have shaken off all but the most self-interested ties to the government. And many civilized systems have simply closed their borders. Only Jedi Knights have the will and skill to defend the helpless. These Jedi Lords began their careers as knights on a quest to defend abandoned worlds from slavery and exploitation. Gradually, they came to hold political authority over systems and entire sectors and became hereditary barons and kings. The Jedi domains were islands of peace and justice, where honorable rulers fought to keep the Sith at bay, attracted other brave Jedi to their banners, and inspired sons and daughters who followed their parents in the ways of the Force. Eventually, the office of Supreme Chancellor and rule of Coruscant itself ceded to a line of Jedi Masters. Let's see. While post-Coruscant historians and Imperial propagandists emphasize the anarchy of these centuries, they also mark the Great Age of Jedi Knights, and many systems prospered under their rule. When Lord Hoth decided to take the offensive against the Sith in 1010 BBY, he gathered Jedi Lords and bands of knights from across the galaxy, a movement that swelled until the last Grand Council of the Order declared the Jedi baronies united as the Army of Light, commanded by Lord Hoth, bearing the ancient title of Seneschal. Let's see, let me just make sure here. And yeah, then the big battle happened on Rusan. And then I'll just skip to the very end.
Mhm.
Once that happened, they're
That's
like,
the
okay, we're
name
done.
and the force bomb and all that, right?
Yeah, Lord Hoth dies.
Yeah.
Veterans of the Army of Life were ignored by the Reformed Jedi Order, which was embarrassed both by their politics and the tragedy of Rusan. The few surviving Jedi Lord returned to their castle and took care of their men calmly, ignoring the orders of the Jedi on Coruscant, and maintained a wary detachment from the Republic for centuries. Even under the New Republic, the remaining Corellian Jedi and Tipo Paladins retain distinct identities based on their descent from the ancient heroes. So yeah, this was I wanted to get to this part in particular, because I think you'd be interested in it because this to kind of essentially use a real world parallel, although this is kind of more of the pop culture version of it. It's like the fall of Rome in the Dark Ages, where essentially the church has to become the state.
Mhm.
That's kind of the vibe I've always gotten from this era. But reading that little passage, Matthew, we'll turn
Yeah.
it to you now. What are your just thoughts on that?
I mean, to go to the real world parallel, right? What happens? Yeah, the Western Empire falls, and I mean, and it's really is just. It's not so much the Dark Ages. It's just they're all disparate, and there isn't much of a central authority. The Pope, the Bishop of Rome, starts to gain more authority, more central, sense of central authority. Already had a sense of leadership over the rest of the Western Church, but it isn't until, say, Saint Gregory the Great, Pope Gregory the Great, who, at the year 600. This is a few centuries later,
Mhm.
and I mean he's literally cleaning up Rome's streets and building infrastructure in the city, because there isn't anyone else to do it, and that's part of the problem. There isn't any civil leader to do it, and so he's it, and so he's there. He's doing his thing. Massive education programs, you know, you know, the changing the way services are, reforming the way services are done. A big musical reform. You heard the phrase. I guess I don't know about Gregorian chant, but a bit of a mutual musical cultural renaissance, and then that there starts what we know as the Middle Ages, and that's the funny thing is we tend to have see this big break, and there are people who are much more experts at this than I am. Then I see this big break between the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages. It really wasn't in the same way. I mean, there what we can see here is, I mean, I think what's interesting is the continuity, especially continuity between um, all the different Jedi baronies and the Army of Light with Lord Hoth, and that leads then into the Rusan. I mean, yes, Rusan
I'll read
Reformation.
Rusan. Don't worry, I got
We'll
it.
get to Rusan, but my thing is, yes, in part response to Bane and the thought bomb and everything. We're getting there, but it also seems to be there seems to be some bit of a sense of continuity. Maybe not. Maybe I'm misreading that. Maybe it's to back up and say, yeah, that the Jedi do fill the void in this way with these space popes,
Mhm.
and 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 I guess it
Jedi
with
Kings.
yeah,
That's-
Jedi, and well, that's the thing is in a way, Gregory, is he Pope, is he Emperor of the West, he functions that way, and what's fascinating is to have a mixed view of history, and to say how the Empire, uh, they call it anarchy, like these Jedi, they're ruling. That's got to be an evil tyranny and also an anarchy at the same time. Um, whereas the reality is probably meant to be more complicated, more mixed. Some Jedi ruled well, some Jedi probably ruled poorly. Some were too scholarly, probably, and just too much ahead in the clouds. Some of them actually,
Oh,
that's my guess about what this
I,
era is like. And so what's fascinating is how later historians uh, come to see that and evaluate that. And I'm curious with the Rusan Reformation and with kind of what we were saying about the rebellion in the High Republic, how uh, how imperial historians look back on this period and say to reinforce their claims, right? Because one of the interesting things that would happen in the real world, in the real world history in the West, is you'd have uh, historians writing these stories to explain it wasn't history in a scientific way of this is what happened and this is how it happened, and you can draw this very technical linear connection. No historian knows that is every historian knows that that's the ideal, that's the hope that they try to do, but no, there's always a moral bias that they're bringing to their account of history. In the Dark Ages and the early Middle Ages, that wasn't a problem. It was Eusebius is writing this story to say how Constantine. I mean, that's the parallel, right? With Lord Hoth, maybe, and then the space popes, Gregory, but also Constantine, making Christianity the state religion and saying, uh, "Yeah, this is meant to happen. God wanted this to happen. The Force wills this." I'd be curious to see. I don't know if any of these stories ever go there, but clearly, of course, the Sith, the Galactic Empire says that this was a tyranny and evil and anarchic at the same time. So that's again the historiography is what's fascinating there, and that maybe that's kind of this whole question that we're trying to address is what is not simply what was the relationship between Jedi and Republic like, but what should it be, and that's with for Ray, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but you know ultimately, for Oregon, for at the end of the High Republic publishing initiative, what should it be? So, anyway, that's where my mind goes. I don't know.
Hoth almost did have a bit of a fall to the dark side, but snapped out of it before the last minute and then felt bad, and that's why he sacrificed himself during the final battle. He did not make it to see the end. He did not make it to see peace. He died in the crusade against the Sith. He almost got a little too overly obsessive with it, and thankfully someone snapped him out of it. And he's like, "Oh shoot, I almost felt the dark side there." It's like, then it's like, "Oh well, I'll sacrifice myself for the Jedi and light." So, it's all worked out.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean,
Now,
just say what do you find interesting about that era? Then we can.
I mean, I find just kind of and honestly, from a fantasy standpoint, it reminds me of like when Morgoth ruled over Middle Earth, and like the elves were like the only enclaves of peace and light. Um, it is because I do again, it does have that kind of fantasy vibe of like, it's a Jedi king, so we're good. It's like, they're no evil Jedi kings. They're just Jedi kings, and they're wise, and they're Jedi, and they're cool. It's interesting. It's like they fathered sons and daughters. At least they were gender balanced. That's nice. Lines of families of Jedi. Um, and it's like there's these Jedi kingdoms that are like we're keeping the peace before like also kind of Game of Thronesy, but also like high elf kings, where it's like the high elf Jedi gets all the other Jedi kings and it's like we're gonna build one big host and we're gonna go against the armies of darkness, and then they did, and
It sounds
we're
very idealized.
It is. I mean, Star
So,
Wars
but
is always going to be a little romantic in some sense.
yeah.
But then we get that ends the war, and now we get to the Rusan Reformations, which leads us closer to the more canonical Star Wars galaxy that we know of. So I'm just going to read the Rusan Reformation from here, kind of give context. We talk about it a lot. Okay, the Rusan Reformations. In 1000 BBY, following the defeat of the Sith at Rusan, Tarsus Valorum, yes, they are related to Valorum, that Valorum, set out to heal a shattered galaxy and rebuild its institutions by making them more democratic and mutually supporting. The Rusan Reformation were an unprecedented experiment of voluntary dismantling of central authority over economic, political, and military power. To make the Senate more governable, Valorum consolidated its millions of sectors into 1,024 regions, with each senator getting essentially one vote, um, with some exceptions to powerful worlds in the core and the colonies, and extend the rights of representation to collectional functions, constituents, ancient institutions, and considerable economic powers. Probably that's why the Trade Federation got a senator. Though not formally bound by the Rusan Reformation, the Jedi Order made fundamental changes as well. The Jedi gave up a bulk of their forces from the ground vehicles to warships and starfighters and became part of the judicial department, reinforcing the fact that they answered to the Senate and were ideally counselors and advisors, not warriors.
Hmm.
To decrease their chance of far-flung academies might stumble into dangerous exploration of the Force, Jedi training was consolidated in the Temple of Coruscant, and Jedi trainees would now be taken into the Order as infants before they could be exposed to the temptations of the material world. But for a war-weary galaxy, the most extraordinary measures of the Rusan Reformation were the ones that abolished the Republic armed forces. The standard military was reorganized as the judicial forces, and relatively small ensemble of task forces, rapid response fleets, intended to patrol the frontier and respond to crisis. The Senate could authorize the judicial forces to relinquish military units from systems and sectors, and the Supreme Chancellor could appoint governor generals to coordinate military action with the senator of a troubled sector. In the absence of major crisis, the planetary security forces from 14 millennia, little more than an auxiliary of the Republic Navy, would be expected to keep the peace. Determined to curb the Republic's regional rivalries and restrict sector fleets to defensive operations, Valorum limited the size and armaments, blah, blah, blah. They were less popular in the mid-realm sectors. Decommissioned Navy cruisers, frigates, and corvettes were assigned to sector forces. Here we go. Here's a good one. While Rim sectors struggled to police their worlds, were creaky, unsizable capital ships, wealthy industrial sectors built giant cruisers. So basically, rich planets, they get the good stuff, and the Rim get the crap. And there were some exemptions made for like the big manufacturers. Just making sure I got everything. But yeah, that's the Rusan Reformation, and that pretty much leads us in. That's more of a direct lead into the prequels, but yeah, that's shoot. Oh, no, okay. But yeah, that's pretty much the Rusan Reformations. Anything stand out to you in that particular reading?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. First of all, it seems like authors in the real world trying to date back, say we can't write the story of what happens after the Galactic Empire. We're going to kind of write what might have happened just 1,000 years earlier. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, what they also did, similar to what I think the High Republic is doing, of saying, how do they get from there to here, or what is the before picture?
Right.
And so to say, yeah, they're similar to the end of the Galactic Republic that we see in Ahsoka with Mon Mothma being so reticent, and even Ziono being so reticent to send military units out. There is this norm of pulling back, and this norm, and that's the word, is norms, not just
Norms.
habits or ideals, but norms, and
Right.
by norms meaning kind of the sense, the bounds of what is acceptable, bounds of what we do, and the growth of democratic norms. And that's another implication of since the 19th century, right? Is in the West we have this growth of democratic norms where now I can get on the internet and I can expect to say I can say whatever I want about Justin Trudeau, and I'm not going to have my police come and knock the door. They don't care, first of all.
Hopefully.
But they're not going to do anything, right? They can't. Because I'm free to just say what I want. It's a democracy. Um, but also the norm of to say, I'm going to conduct my discourse, my political discourse, in a more peaceable way. One of the, again, talk about secularism, and that's the interesting thing, and secularism, pluralism, and how Jedi in this era seem to be actively embracing the norm of secularism because uh, that this whole maybe their understanding of the Army of Light, it would maybe some of them said it was necessary for the time, or they
Pretty
thought it was,
much.
or they maybe some of them thought it was a huge disaster and we got to stop, or to say that the reason for it is over.
I have that answer in the book.
Yeah. Okay. Well, give me the answer, but I'll say that whatever it is, they and you can answer that in a second, but they take upon themselves the sense of we have to step back, not because we're afraid, not because that's the interesting difference, not because there's a Markian row and these force killer dogs running loose, but because we need to actually step back and cooperate, and that this power is corrupting us too much. I don't know. Um, yeah, to say step back and cooperate. So I don't know what how did they understand their giving up their title and disbanding the Army of Light and whatnot.
Basically, they were afraid if they kept an army that another Sith army would just rise up and be back to square one all over again. So it's like
Good
we don't
arms
want that to
race.
happen. So
Yeah.
so it's like, well, the Sith army are gone. No point of having us have an army. Otherwise, we're just gonna just keep poking the bear. It just feels like so. Let's step back.
Yeah, that is
Um,
interesting. Um, like more of an afraid of an arms race.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of just afraid of like, oh, great, another Jedi gonna just form their army and
Mhm.
dark Empire army. And
Or
it's gonna go
all getting in the
back
wrong
to
hand.
just bunch of lightsabers swinging all over the place again.
Like they're worried about like another schism and then falling to the wrong hands, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's just another schism, and then it's like all the Jedi army they're gonna come together and like, yeah, we don't want this, so we're gonna the Sith are gone. We
Mm.
think, you know,
Yeah.
we didn't know Darth Bane was a thing.
What I
But
found interesting there is then the Jedi are under the direct control of the Senate and are part of the judicial forces. Um, which again, is a little concerning to me. Is like why did they do that? But I mean, is there also a sense of republic norms? Is it specifically Jedi for when they're undertaking any kind of military or protective activity, but they're free to do research and contemplate the Force and whatnot?
I mean, I can see why. It's like bunch of powerful people who can blow you up with your mind. Do you really want them to run around
So it's
doing
more like
whatever
the
they want?
Sokovia Accords. I see. Okay.
Kind of. Although I
Yeah.
think it's more of a willing thing. Like, we should probably just be under some supervision.
Well, there's the parallel, right? I mean, the Sokovia Accords. Tony and them are all. Yeah, we need to actually come under some sort of UN regulatory body. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's the thing. And they're. I guess maybe the parallel now is to say, uh, I mean, spiritual abuse. That and
Do you
some.
want a bunch of people who can blow up your mind with the thought to be just running around willy nilly?
I don't want someone who can say the Bible says this and it's turns out horribly destructive to be running around. Now that gets internally policed within churches, ideally, but we've had all these civil cases where criminal cases, bankruptcies and lawsuits and whatnot. I mean, from the residential schools, the abuse crisis, all that.
I mean, I guess here's a question though. How much of it is us just projecting the Jedi as a religion like the Christianity, and how much of it is George himself even being like, well, they're monks, but they're also kind of not monks. Like,
Yeah, that's true. How far does the parallel go and where does it end? Is maybe what you're asking, which is also possible. Yeah, to say, there's no. I mean, what I'm saying is there's still a metaphor of spiritual authority,
right.
and that needs to be internally regulated. And one of the ways to internally regulate is to externally regulate, right? To have rules to cooperate with civil authorities. Uh, yeah, and it seems to me at the time of after this great war that the Jedi have really come to a place of saying we need to do this and we want to do this. So
Now, I want to put just a little caveat note for the audience out here. And I'm not saying what we just discussed for the last couple of minutes is like been pointless, but the Darth Bane books and what we've talked about very much are trying to square the circle of a lot of the 90s and early 2000s portrayal of the Jedi Order in the Old Republic stuff and trying to get them more closer to what they were like in the prequels when that stuff was wrapped up. So, for all we know, canon might be somewhat different, although they did mention Jedi militaries in the past, so we can only speculate, but that's why we decide to go with this route for like the early pass to kind of get a sense of like maybe this is the direction they'll go, maybe they'll change something up. We don't know, but that rhymed. But I just wanted to like put a little pin on that for
Yeah.
the audience.
I mean, one of the things, another thing you're talking about with the Rasan reformations, that the canon version of that, this gets at what I was saying about 200 years being about right. 1,000 years, that's too long, you know, for there to be any sort of direct, like it just thinking now doesn't seem to make as much sense. Maybe because we have High Republic, and maybe we have just, I don't know, maybe we have a better sense of history. It seems a bit of a leap to say that these changes that were instituted 1,000 years ago are a direct beeline to 1,000 years later. Whereas I think you can make a bit more of a case with the 200 years between the fall of Starlight Beacon and the fall of the Jedi Order.
Oh yeah, I mean to be fair, that High Republic era was never touched, and maybe in their heads it's like the Jedi did this, and for 1,000 years the Jedi were centralized on Coruscant, and it worked out until it didn't. So the High Republic kind of Jedi are kind of different. They are different. So
I guess what I want to say is, whatever the canon version of after Rasan, after Malachor, after
Malachor's
whatever
different. Rasan, yeah.
I know,
After.
but there seems to be, what we know is there seems to be some big terrible moral disaster for the Jedi and the Republic that also is involved in Bane going into hiding, also is involved in some establishment, like we were talking about a few weeks ago, of the Galactic Republic as opposed to the Old Republic. That then, in 750 years later, we have we have the Battle of Jeddah and the Battle of Dalna and all that stuff, and we have the phase 2. I mean, the more historically significant is phase 1 and 3. So 800 years later, we have Lena So and her great works, which we'll get to.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be honest. I have like the most cynical, cynical take of this, because they talk about how the Republic fell and whatnot, in this particular era, and if this era ever gets like maybe if it's portrayed in book, maybe it won't be like that. Maybe it'll be more creative. But I just got a feeling in my gut that if this era is ever portrayed on screen, this is how it's going to be set up. The Sith Empire rules, but our underdog rebels of the Jedi and their pals are going to stop them because that's what rebels do. Like, I don't know. I don't think they'll go with Jedi Lord as much as I think that'd be cool and Jedi King.
That's too repetitive.
I know, but I don't trust it. I mean, I would like to see the Jedi Lord
writing that. Then yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Who knows, man? At this point, who knows what they'll do? I mean, I'm very curious to see what the take on this era will be outside of the. I mean, because like again, we the basics are still the same. Of the Sith Empire kind of took over. The Jedi, I don't think they got purged down to one. At least I hope not. But like they got their butts kicked and kind of became something rebellious. Clearly, they clearly were the underdogs in this fight. And then obviously the Sith killed themselves, and the Jedi took advantage of that, and then Darth Bane fled. So there's the outline. It's just I'm curious what the details will be. What the actual will there be Jedi lords and kings and queens and knights and barons, or are we gonna do something else?
And how it connects with
and now they have something to connect with. So yeah,
that's true. I mean, and for we did a whole episode on what we know of the Old Republican canon.
Right.
Was it last week or 2 weeks ago? So give us a chance there.
But yeah, so that's all the legendsy Old Republic past stuff of Jedi, and Republic's view. And I'll just say before we move on to this, because this is sort of the next big epoch, it's very much an alliance born in blood and war for sure. where they're just fighting the Sith and the Mandos and ancient people even before then over and over again. It's very much an alliance of blood and brotherhood, maybe, and even betrayal, and then coming back and whatnot. So, yeah, I'll be curious if that's basically the way it is in canon when we actually get to that stuff, if we ever get to that stuff. But these two groups just kind of come together, and it's interesting. Again, the Jedi decide to join with the Republic as its defenders under. Well, George himself has always talked about how, yeah, the galaxy's under the wise rule of the Senate, and the Jedi are its defenders. They are the defenders of
The
the Senate.
wise rule of the Senate, but where do they get their wisdom from? I guess is the question.
I don't know. I mean, I think in George's case, he just thinks it's the Senate. It's good. Something you gotta,
Yeah.
I think the thing about George is that I think he is kind of into pop history and that kind of fantasy history of like, the Senate's good, because it's wise and got all the good people in it.
An august assembly.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
maybe there's a way of saying that they care about the Force. They're not Force. They're not Jedi, but they care about the wisdom of the Force.
I mean, I guess the question is, are we being too much putting up these real world parallels when again it's like, are even the writers going to be doing this too? Like some will, some won't. I don't even think George was per se. I think he was very much more like, the Jedi were the wise rule of the Senate, and then the Guardians.
Guardians of peace is justice in the Republic. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's sort of, it's just something I just always think about when it's like we're making these real world parallels. Where it's like, should we really be projecting too much? Are we projecting too? When are we going too far? And when
Right. I mean, that's the same question with Star Trek, right? We project into the future. So there's kind of a utopia in the future. This is a utopia in the past, a fantasy utopia, in a way. Like the idea of an august assembly in the Senate.
Right.
Yeah, it's fantasy. That's true. It's fantasy genre. They can do that. They can have an idea of a benevolent rule. You know. Speaking of benevolent rule, are we good to move on?
Oh yeah. So yeah, to the High Republic now, which is the more canonical stuff. So
Yeah.
this is really, in terms of Star Wars today, our best insight of the canonical high era of the Jedi and the Republic, and why do people fight for these two groups to always be together? Why is it that when push comes to shove, the Jedi always pick the Republic? Now they're not picking the Empire, that's for sure. So they're not going by themselves.
Mhm.
So this is sort of the glory area.
Yeah. So I'll dive into this. So, I mean, again, maybe I say Augusta something. Where do they get their wisdom from? The High Republic. Lena So, she she's elevated. She is an ideal ruler in her way. I mean, she has these weird, scary giant cat things. You know, who knows what she stands to gain from these great works? I mean, she stands to gain a lot, consolidating her power, consolidating it through diversity and through, through welcome and hospitality. But they say they all come under her wing, under her authority to then dictate how she wants things to play out. Is that benevolent or not? I don't know. Ultimately, kind of is. I mean, that's the thing. The idea of Starlight Beacon is that the Jedi and the Republic are cooperating in this great work, and the Starlight Beacon is the great of the great works,
Mhm.
The greatest of the great works, and so because it is Jedi and Republic cooperating to expand light and life, this mission of light and life, out into the outer rim, where at this point in time there hasn't been much consolidation, much connection with the rest of the galaxy. 150 years before, they had to send out these Pathfinder teams and have these communications buoys and find these hyperspace buoys to be able to actually travel. At this point, with Starlight, it represents the communications hub. And as we all know, I mean, communication with the internet, for example, the internet has completely changed the way we communicate. I'm on YouTube right now talking to you, California. We're talking about a space fantasy. The way we connect and the way we exchange ideas and the way we have a sense of a common people. There's a Jedi Marshal and a Republic envoy, and they're both
They're ambassadors. They're
the
Martians.
Republic ambassador, and then all the idea of Starlight is all the different cultures of the Outer Rim, and they come together and they have their pods and their locations, and people can move to and fro and share. And so this guy sees that, and he sees that as the biggest threat possibly to an independent Outer Rim, the biggest threat to the Nile's ability to go in and take what they want, and do what they want. And so he hits them where it hurts the most. Markin hits them where it hurts the most. It is the greatest disaster because the fall of Starlight, because he knows just how important the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic is. If he can take down Starlight Beacon, then he can say that this great relationship between Jedi and Republic, this great relationship between inner rim, core and outer rim, that is doomed to fail. And in a way, I mean, that's the thing is, what if he ultimately succeeds, right? What if the idea of the occlusion zone and driving the Jedi, the norm of saying we're just going to stay back into Coruscant, um, that definitely secures, and here's another thing I want to start thinking about. I think we were going back and forth in this, maybe in the Discord, um, the birth of outer rim separatism and the birth of yes, with the Trade Federation, yes, with the banking clan, but also with Monteris and with uh, all these other even people on Sereno and these other planets resenting the Republic overreach. They also resent the Jedi overreach, and so there is this starting point here where Markian is able to hit them where it hurts. Um, you have in your notes here that the Jedi, for the most part, yeah, they are in harmony with each other primarily. Um, there is a big, especially in Phase 1. I think in Phase 3, there's also going to be this big tension between Jedi who are passive and want to retreat into Starlight Beacon, or want to retreat into this in Phase 1 at least, into you know the norms of deciding these things in council, where you have Jorah Mali saying, "No, I'm just going to go and fight in this battle." You have Avar saying, "I'm going to go take on the Drengar," and that has negative consequences for her. You have Vern, who's now a Wayfinder, and you have Keeve, who wants to go out and into to the Outer Rim, to these lost planets where that are cut off, and start to aid them, and they're just the small little places they are. Um, yeah, there is this, again, going with your notes here. These massive cracks in the foundation of trust, but you know, and I'll
Are
let
they
you get.
massive cracks though? I think
No,
maybe.
sorry, they don't seem to be. Sorry, but
Okay.
they're hairline fractures. The hairline fractures within the Jedi themselves, and that's the interesting thing that one of the interesting things that I'm curious. Before I get into the Guardian protocols specifically, what are your thoughts on the Jedi and the Republic during the High Republic era?
Well, I think this is very much what George himself was always saying when we talk about the Jedi and the Republic. I have just a few more quotes here. That's like, it says the Jedi have the same relationship to the Republic. They're like public servants. They're like marshals or policemen. He always brings up policemen. They
Marshall.
basically do what they are told to do. They're not independent agents who can do whatever they want. George seems very keen on making sure that Jedi are not independent agents. He seems to be very pro that.
Which
Um,
isn't really how they don't really function that they do function more independently
I
in the
mean,
story. But
in
they
Phantom
again,
Menace, they're
yeah,
on the orders of the Chancellor
sure.
to
By the time of
negotiate.
the prequel, I mean during the High Republic, though, again, I keep bringing this up, the development of norms where they would be under the thumb, under the orders. Anyway, keep going.
True, but I think George sees that as a good thing. I think he's all pro. Yeah,
Sure.
there's public servants under the Republic. That's how he always saw it worked.
Mhm.
Um, the Senate does what it does.
Yeah.
What am I gonna say? So, the High Republic following George's vision? I don't know. That's a whole other discussion. Um, but yeah, this is still the glory days. If things were, I feel like if things were as bad, then the Sith would have been taking advantage of it for a while. You know, that's was another big debate of like the whole prequel. Should they? Because like, well, where are the Sith? Well, Sith aren't around because things are still pretty good. They're not
Yeah.
taking advantage of this Nihil stuff because even if they could, they can't because it's still the Republic is still a strong institution. It's just going through a bit of an issue right now. It's like, where like Sidious probably couldn't have taken advantage of this opportunity even if he tried, because that's how strong the Republic and the public and the Jedi's sort of whole spiel
The
is.
cooperation, and it's like a cooperation of equals almost.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're good.
In terms of like, I also think this is also kind of like what are the authorial intent, what are their ideologies and whatnot. It's like, are they really questioning the system, or is it like, no, Lena So's a good person, so Lena So should be trusted. That it's like, it's like, well, it's sort of the it's sort of the more, I guess, kind of for lack of an ideological concern, liberal mindset of like, it's not the institution that's the problem. It's just put the smart people in the institution and you're good. So because it works, the system works. So there's that as well. There's gonna be debate for sure. Like no one's ever gonna be like, you should, like we're all in agreement, one big happy family. But I think,
Sorry.
but I do think that even in that debate, I do think the High Republic era is the Republic still strong. And it's still got 3 centuries on it, and it's like I think in history, real world history is not that fatalistic. World War One was avoidable. World War Two was avoidable. The French, everything in history is avoidable to a certain extent. Different decisions could have been made. The difference is obviously that we have these decisions already made, so we can't really change them at this point. We have some certain things locked in. But that's the point of telling a narrative. And again, I guess that's also just I know we're kind of making it just a bit of a different discussion, but it's like, you know, how much of this do we have to? How much of this are we seeing this as history, and how much of this is just fictional narrative and the balance and whatnot between that? Um, but I do think in a lot of ways the High Republic is trying to tell us, yes, this is the ideal Jedi Republic story. This is if you want to not see this as tragedy, then yeah. I mean, obviously we'll find out in phase 3 if I'm wrong or right. But in terms of this initiative, I think the point is, yes, this is when the Republic and the Jedi were the best of pals. Sometimes pals have tension, but you know what? At the end of the day, they're gonna kick the Nile's butt. They did it. This is what it's supposed to be. This is what Mon Mothma and Luke are all kind of ideally fighting for. Yada yada.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's always kind of how I've always seen the High Republic in some way.
It's called the High Republic for a reason, right?
Right.
It's gold. It is. They literally have the golden robes. It is a place, yeah, where this again this fantasy. Well, this fantasy that political leaders can be trusted, and that religious leaders can be trusted to cooperate with political leaders, and that they're all out there for the common good as best they can. An interesting thing to think about is character point of view, right? That these, especially the Padawans and young Jedi, just like Luke saying, for Luke, yeah, the rebellion is the source of good and light in the galaxy. For these Padawans and young knights, the Jedi are the source of light and life, and the Republic allies, right? But also, the shipping crew with Affy and the vessel, right? There's always these. I mean, narratives need protagonists as to drive the story, and they need to have. We need to trust that they're out for the greater good, the common good, and more or less. I mean, not every story. Some stories there's the anti-hero, but High Republic, by and large, except for Lorna D's story, I think.
I mean, I'd say tonally, High Republic is very much in line with what I call traditional Star Wars, right? I mean, maybe, I mean, what I mean by traditional Star Wars is like, we like to, you and I, man, we like to look at things historically, like there's nuance and stuff like that and all that good stuff. But remember, this is the world where Palpatine exists.
Yeah.
There's no nuance to Palpatine. He's just evil. And he should stay that way, by the way.
I mean, what I'm thinking about still then is, we like to make this distinction between Star Trek and Star Wars. We like to make this distinction between Roddenberry's sense of the goodness of institutions and George Lucas' sense of cynicism about institutions. I guess he wasn't as cynical as we think he is. He's just on guard and on watch. And again, it's instead of projecting from our time future, it's projecting from, say, a time we've first been given in this fantasy world of 1977 of this empire, dystopian empire, just going backwards and saying, okay, there was this, not a utopia. We do know more. It's more complicated than that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like you said, this like Camelot, right? And by Camelot, I specifically mean the Kennedy Camelot. This is the parallel that Charles Soule brought up of, yeah, that the American government could actually come, with
There's
some
issues with that too, but
there are issues. I mean,
okay.
that's you can say that. But I think the idea, not the ideal, the idea is, in the ideology, is that American government can promote the common good. And we can sit here and debate that and be skeptical of that.
Oh,
But at least they're telling a story of what if an aspect of that were true, and what if, here's the thing, is where does these space wizards come in, right?
right.
To say, and this religious institution that actually taps into something in the universe that is cosmically built in. What does it look like for them to cooperate? And that's one of the reasons why it's my favorite thing in Star Wars, because it's so fascinating, because we never got that question answered. We did maybe in Legends, like you were saying before, but I mean in a different way, right? To contrast it with the Army of Light. This isn't an Army of Light filling in a gap here. It's Jedi seeming to be the conscience of society, but also cooperating with in a confident dignity alongside. And so here's the thing, and it is the last thing I want to say before we get into the Guardian programs. The thing I want to say is one of the driving forces about the High Republic is the question: what do the Jedi fear? And I've always wanted to go into that. I never thought it's the boring Palpatine answer, just losing their own power, their ability to tell people what they want to do. It's losing their place of benign influence, losing their ability to. I mean, what we know with the Shrieker, the Nameless, it's that the thing that they hold most dear, the connection to the Force, is actually the thing that could kill them. But also, it's to say that their connection to the Force won't be sufficient to sustain the galaxy. That's their deeper fear, that they can't cooperate with the Republic anymore. And Markian is definitely hitting them where that hurts the most, and that's the drama.
The thing about Star Wars and history, and I listened to a podcast about this. I don't remember their names. I wish I did. And they brought up a good point. They brought up a point from a book like Star Wars and History, is that Lucas, and I think most Star Wars, leans more or less into real history and more like what they called pop history, which is sort of the they're like World War II, the overly poppy version, the good guy allies of USSR, and UK, Winston and FDR and Stalin versus that no good Hitler, and kicking some Nazi butt. Let's get when World War II is a much more
America, right?
Yeah, it's much more of a complicated geopolitical thing. I mean, still, I'm not going to do both sides of Nazis, but much more complex. It's that more Captain America thing. It's like there wasn't racism during World War II. Captain buddies didn't matter. We're just fighting Hydra. And Star Wars leans into that, especially like with the Camelot thing, with like the pop Camelot. We're gonna go to the moon. Gonna be great, instead of like, oh no, actually this area was actually way more cynical and there was a lot more problems going on, and Kennedy is like did some stuff, and everyone kind of sucked. So there, I think that's sort of always cautious of being when it comes to, again, history, which I always put in, which I always like making a caveat when coming to real, because again, and I think biggest difference between, although Star Trek also leans into pop history quite a bit, especially that classic Cold War America. We got Klingons, the commies. But what was I gonna say? But I mean, the biggest difference obviously between Star Wars and Star Trek, um, one's sci-fi, one's fantasy. You
True.
know, Leia the princess. You know, fighting Empire. You know, George didn't do that because he thought with monarchist. He's like, that's just what fantasy is. It's knights and swords and princesses, but instead
And
of just
cosmic
laser
powers, right?
and wizards,
Yeah.
instead of it's with laser swords and sometimes they're blasters.
Yeah.
So it's just traditional Tolkien fantasy. I compared the Jedi to the elves in that Dark Ages time.
Whereas in contrast with Gene Roddenberry, very much the '60s, the extreme of all religion is just going to be bad, and it's one of those vestige institutions of the past that we need to get rid of in order to move forward as a species, and yeah, and that's interesting to see. Yeah, that we have. I mean, Star Trek now is a bit able to be more complicated than that, and that they've able to be more open to different things. But yeah, I mean, to see how for George that wasn't a feature, whereas for Gene it was, and and again they led to interesting stories, led to a good critique of religious assumptions, and the prequels also did this to some extent, but to a much lesser extent. So
I
yeah,
mean, yeah, it's like George never. George obviously was inspired by Vietnam and influenced by that and stuff like that. But I the Nixon thing with Palpatine, as we always like to say. But as much as that exists, and I do think that is real. Don't get me wrong. Um, Palpatine is just the archetypical evil wizard as well. He's both. He's both the Nixon allegory that George had in the back of his mind,
yeah,
but he's also just the stereotypical evil wizard about invaders, his Black Knight.
he's also the Bush. The people, the pastors praying around him, God's chosen leader. The dark side has anointed him king, kind of thing. There is that too. So it just yeah, it takes it's a bit more it's more nuanced than Roddenberry, because maybe it's later and more localized. So anyway, I do want to talk a bit
Oh
about
yeah,
the Guardian protocols a little
the
more, and
Guardian
then
protocols.
just because that is another moment, and this does get us to the Clone Wars, and I'll explain why. Um, the reason why I bring this up, it is recent, and so it is something fresh off the press in the canon. And so I'll dive into them very quickly. Uh, what they are. So Starlight Beacon falls, and clearly there is this great disaster. Markian hit them where they hurt the most. They are emergency measures for the Jedi Order that they take for themselves. The Republic doesn't require it of them. They doesn't say you have to do this. It's Jedi, we're going to do this. We'll tell the Senate this is what we're doing. It's introduced in Shadows of Starlight #1. It's reflected to some extent in the Insider short story, Tales from the Occlusion Zone, No Big Deal. Basically, what it is they're going to tighten up. They have a tighter organization, more military-like discipline. There's going to restrict independent research into the Force, into different ideas, and even in scientific research. Everything, their time and resources and effort are going to be focused on the war, on this emergency situation. Yeah, again, it's emergency measures. It also means that they're going to have greater availability for the Republic in actions against the Nile. And
Mm-hmm.
availability, for example, Joss and Pekka would, are hoping to get the Republic or to get the Jedi help. In that case, they can't. But um, the idea is that they can cooperate more fully in the Republic's war against the Nile. There's an accelerator. This is the wild thing. There's an acceleration of youngling and Padawan combat training. Padawans can take the night trials whenever they feel they want, and whenever their masters say, "Yeah, go for it." There's take them early, like just earlier when they're usually. This is the wild one. Younglings can use real sabers if the teachers think they'll be able to handle it. They graduate to say, "You never know when the Nile are going to attack Coruscant. You never know." To give these kids the best shot they can. Uh, even just practically about lightsabers, there's a moment in Shadows of Starlight churning out more sturdier, simpler, less artistic sabers like we see in the prequels. The type of thing we see in the prequels, just the thin the plain metal tube, yeah, Jedi can have their own flourish to them, but it's nothing compared to the elaborate gold crossguard sabers we see in Phase One. Another interesting one, because everything's centralized on Coruscant, outposts are primarily staffed by droids. So they haven't given up on the outposts. It's just that they're droids there. Sounds familiar? Droids in the Outer Rim, who will relay directly to the Coruscant Temple. There's the quote: the council will evaluate mission assignments on a case by case basis. So a knight, usually knights and masters, could go off and do what they want, and I guess they sort of can, but not to the same extent. They have to. It's all very centralized there. They say we'll not seek out violence, but there may be opportunities for targeted strikes and preemptive strikes. And so again, cooperating and being more active, but it's still, again, it's the norm, the habit of being more centralized and defending the home, if you will, possibly through preemptive strikes. All Jedi have to travel at least in pairs. You can't be on your own and get captured. Either has to be in pairs. I think there's some story implications about that coming down the pipe. So yeah, so those are the Guardian protocols, and again, it's this new oomph in the Jedi cooperation with the Republic in this emergency. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because it's one of the things I think definitely does continue. I mean, that is the habit. That is the norm. The Star Wars Explained has a great video suggesting that a lot of these things, his video on the Guardian protocols, a lot of these things are either just stay in place, become part of what the Jedi are about, or for the next 200 years, or they get reactivated during the Clone Wars.
I think it's better to get reactivated during the Clone Wars. I feel like if they stayed in place for 200 years, the Jedi would have fallen sooner.
Maybe. I mean, it's possible. I mean, what? And we can definitely talk about that. But especially, military discipline. We see them joining the war, becoming the generals. That's very much like a Guardians protocol type of thing. Another thing Alex suggests is it gives Palpatine a course of action he can predict. That this is how the Jedi are going to react when the Separatist threat comes in full force. And boom, Guardian protocols. Then I'll definitely be able to use this to my advantage. So that's that. I mean, what we have here enumerated is what it means for, similar again to what you're saying about the Jedi being part of, under the judiciary forces after the Sun reformations. Here it's not to the same extent, but they're intentionally mobilizing as a military like unit with military discipline for the express purpose of aiding the Republic. And that, again, that's what Palpatine can take advantage of. Does it mean that they continue to hold on to their soul as guardians of peace and justice? Because we know war is the opposite of peace, and it's often the opposite of justice. And that's the deeper question with this ramp up to militarization for the Jedi. 200 years before the Clone Wars. That's or 210 years, whatever, years before the Clone Wars. It's this fascinating turn in the High Republic moment of the Jedi and the Republic. So, what do you think about the Guardian protocols in the moment and in the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic? What do you think in terms of that theory about the Clone Wars? And you think it got reactivated? Makes more sense. But what do you think?
The way Mike Chit, I actually feel like it did get reactivated because that pretty much happens. Spoiler alert, but that's pretty much what happens in the Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade, where it's like, yep, Padawans are getting all promoted. Gotta go. That's how Iscat's so young, yet she gets promoted to a knight pretty quickly without even taking her trials. She doesn't even have to take her trials; she gets promoted.
I mean, it's similar to what we see in Ahsoka, right? In that episode 5.
I don't think she ever gets knighted, though.
No, but it's like how she's thrown into war, and all her training is about war, not about being a guardian of peace.
So here's how I see it, and this is the only way I think it can work for 200 more years of pretty much good times, or at least better times. I think some of this has to get reversed, though. I don't think you can be in an emergency and exhaust your society for that long before you collapse. That was Palpatine's whole thing: is just drag out the Clone Wars as long as possible before everyone gets exhausted, and then it was like, okay, you could be Emperor. Just make it stop. Um, so I clearly think something has to stop before everyone just gets exhausted.
Sure.
Maybe certain things stick, and I'm sure there's probably consequences. But to also play with the High Republic, kind of that maybe more liberal idea of, well, you got more decent people in power, so they'll know when to stop and not abuse this. And then when Palpatine comes along, he's gonna totally abuse this because that's what he does. So there's that question. Although again, I don't know. I'm just making a prediction here.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm ready to be open minded with anything, but Phase 3 hasn't started yet, so we
Well,
have to
it
see.
just did, but
It just started, so we still have to see.
uh,
Someone brought
I
up
it comes out tomorrow. By the way.
someone brought up like maybe certain people do get knighted too early, and that's going to have some long term ramifications in the future.
I mean, I've always wondered why Keeve and Vern are knights so young. I still don't know why Keeve's a master at this age. She's starting to grow into it, but I wonder if that's part of this too.
Um, so there's that. I mean, I'm sure there's gonna be some consequence, but again, I feel like if they had kept this going for 200 years, I think something would have broken a lot sooner.
Yeah.
So
That
it's like
makes sense. I mean, I don't think it's all or nothing.
right. I mean, I'm sure like 'cause that's why I think something's going. They're going to. I do think the Nile will be defeated, and obviously this won't last that long. Because again, the Clone Wars is supposed to have a real big scar on the galaxy. So in terms of just scale and just destruction,
Mhm.
while this Nile thing problem, but I do still wonder in terms of like the scope of Star Wars history, is the Nile still just a little problem compared to what's about to come in 200 years with the Clone Wars, which is a big problem where the Coruscant itself gets attacked and invaded.
Again,
it-
what I said a few weeks ago, it's the biggest war in galactic history.
exactly. So it's like I do think maybe because of that as well, that's why some of the Guardian protocols probably get reversed. Um, for sure. So that's sort of my kind of thoughts on it. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, they're probably using it now, and the Nile will probably be defeated because there's no Nile by the time we get to the prequels.
What do you think of the in the time period itself? What do you think of the Guardian protocols? The Jedi are supposed to be the guardians of peace. They are. Um, we just talked all about the Camelot sort of high fantasy, benevolent golden era. That the Guardian protocols. This is part of the golden age. What do you think of that?
I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, and sometimes even every organization's got something. Star Trek can have Section 31, and
True.
Jedi gotta have this, and at least this is open. No one knows about Section 31.
Wait, what is Section 30? I don't know what you're talking about.
They got me. They got me. Yeah. But yeah. So every organization's got something. Maybe the Jedi aren't going to just be completely like, yeah, there's not going to be any problems. Like, it's like I'm sure in the back of their mind they're always like, oh, shoot, a Sith army's going to come one. What if the Sith army comes? We got to get ready. We're going to have something. Just don't let that fear consume them.
Yeah.
So this is the biggest crisis the Republic's probably faced in a while compared to, it's not Sith Empire size, but it's still a problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense to do something like this, maybe, kind of just get ready. Because
Do we think it's still, again, the conversation I keep bringing up, it's training the Jedi to become soldiers and not keepers of the peace?
Yes and no, but the problem I have with that is, unless we get some more stories in between, which one, I mean, Will was an acolyte. The Jedi don't really need to be soldiers again for another 200 years, so it's like this is a one and done thing. And unless there's another crisis in the next 200 years that requires Jedi to become soldiers, I'm kind of not seeing a major issue right now. So,
To your point,
like,
need to, yeah,
right, like There's like we don't know. Maybe they'll make a crisis. Like, that's what storytelling is for. But like we see in the Phantom Menace, the Jedi clearly are. George always felt with Phantom Menace that's when the Jedi were at their best. Like this is his ideal Jedi order. They're just negotiating with the Trade Federation. Then when the Trade Federation attacks, they'll defend. Then they'll help out the Queen do her thing. But in terms of the Jedi Order themselves, like, yeah, they're still their ambassadors. It's not like we're seeing Jedi armies with. Not like thing where the Jedi don't go in Naboo and get an army and attack the Trade Federation. That comes later when they try to with the Separatist problem. But that's
Right.
So. I don't know. I don't really know what the long term effects are going to be because it's like we don't know of any major crises after the Nile fall. So
I just think it's very fast the way you have your notes here. The Jedi go from becoming diplomats to generals. Maybe we can read a good thing into that, benevolent thing into that. I wonder if John Jackson Miller is going to talk about. I mean, maybe that's an implication of Qui-Gon going to the council and saying, "Hey, there's a whole galaxy out there that needs us. Why are we contemplating how many angels of Viego can dance on the head of a space pin?" But
maybe the consequences they do it and then they win and then they kind of freak out and then they really retrench themselves. Like, oh shoot, we became warriors for a second.
Yeah,
we don't want that. Reverse.
Maybe that's one of the things they fear is losing their soul in that way.
Maybe that's how you do the reversal, where it's like they did win, and then it's like, oh shoot, what happened? Like, thank God we didn't get Order 66. Reverse.
Yeah.
But maybe keep that policy on the Jedi standardization of lightsabers. That's going to be cheap. Maybe we should get rid of
cost effective. Yeah.
Cost effective. Yoda, money in the bank we could save. Yeah. Good for pizzas. We can't. But that's where I think that's where the reverse should come. But that's just me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean that fits with everything. I mean to say we're just safer from ourselves being part of the Republic.
I got an idea. This just came to my head right now.
Mm-hmm.
What if this whole High Republic thing is almost like in kind of theory, and I don't know if the authors intended it or not. Like, what if the Jedi won the Clone Wars, but didn't get Order 66, and then what would have happened? Right? Because you got a crisis in the Outer Rim. Got the Jedi got to do some stuff that they're not comfy with, and they're clearly going to win because obviously they're no Nile. But they didn't get Order 66 because obviously, and here's the big thing, the Republic is, oversimplified, but maybe that's the point. The Republic is ruled by a good person. Chancellor, unless there's going to be a 180 I'm not aware of, Chancellor Soul is not a Sith Lord trying to undermine them.
Right.
So
that could be another part of it, right? I mean, the canon thought experiment and the way history repeats itself with little things. Yeah,
but Palpatine was not a Sith Lord.
I mean, it speaks to the like you're saying with members of the rebellion looking back on this as a golden age. Because they all know what happened with Order 66 and Palpatine and all that. They understand that history now at that point. So to say, okay, what if?
I'll just say this, and I guess we can kind of make this our transition to the Clone Wars if you don't mind, unless you want to.
Well, I thought we're already there.
Okay, yeah. Okay, which is interesting is that I don't remember. There's a lot of the good guys always say this. It's never the Jedi fell. It's the Republic betrayed the Jedi.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, this is on the Republic. They blame the Republic less than they blame the Jedi for their own fall. They Palpatine betrayed everybody.
I mean that's kind of Rian Johnson's point. That's kind of the point in The Last Jedi, is that there's still a good for the Jedi in the galaxy, and it's really corporate interests. It's money fueling the game of war. We have DJ on what planet is that? Canto Bight. In Canto Bight saying good guys, bad guys, it's all the same because there's a cycle of war and it's corporate interests supported at this point by the rebellion or by the Republic and by the Empire and allowed to fester. Yeah, it's yeah, it's true. I mean, and so there's always room for the Jedi to come back and be the soul, not just the guardians of peace and justice, be the soul of the galaxy, the soul of people in the galaxy.
And this kind of, I'll start getting to post Endor in a bit, but this kind of goes into, you're all thinking about secularism and whatnot, where, in the very fantastical Star Wars writings of old, they're always like, the Republic was under the wise rule of the Senate, but thanks to mega corporations and massive orbits of commerce, the Senate became corrupt, and an ambitious person named Palpatine was voted Chancellor, and then he turned on the Jedi.
That's
So,
the
like,
prequel trilogy.
yeah, that's the prequel trilogy in a nutshell. So, yeah, I think to kind of wrap up the High Republic Clone Wars thing, it's like, is this like the crisis of the Separatist crisis, but maybe on a smaller scale, and this time with the Jedi, the Republic's not going to stab the Republic and the Jedi in the back this time. There is no great backstab. So, yeah, so let's get to post Endor, shall we? So this is where things get interesting, because we kind of have divergent timelines, variance timelines. We have Legends, which is a lot more, which a lot more detail for the most part, and Canon, which is a lot less detail. So, in terms of the Canon, we're in Legends, we're kind of more or less play the same. Luke's kind of still a little unsure what to do. He asks Mom Mothma, "Hey, Mom Mothma, can we get a Republic Jedi order?" And Mom Mothma says, "Good deal. I want Jedi. I want lots of Jedi. I want Jedi in every home. I want Jedi doctors. I want just the Jedi around." I had a great quote and I lost it, but anyway. So yeah, so there's that. Luke forms the Jedi Praxium, and for the most part, it's good. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It is good Jedi.
They're fine.
Yeah, they fight Thrawn. They fight the clone Palpatine. They fight the Yuzong Vong, and everything is pretty hunky dory. And then this is where legends start to get really weird. But later on, the dark and very dark and cynical too. But then there's after that, then Jason Solo falls to the dark side. He becomes the Supreme Chancellor through a coup. There's a Jedi Civil War, a New Republic Civil War, because they're like, oh, we don't want that. And then after that, the Senate had a great idea of electing Imperial leader Admiral Dala as the Chancellor. And she's all like, I don't really trust the Jedi, and Luke's not feeling it with the Jedi. So he kind of, him and his faction of Jedi kind of go into self-exile for a while. And then 100 years later, the Sith Empire takes over again, and then the Resistance and the Jedi and the Imperial remnants, who are the good guys, defeat the Sith, and there's like a Jedi Imperial triumvirate, and basically Force monarchy rules the day. Yeah, it's weird. In canon so far, seems like Luke really wants to detach himself from almost everybody in a weird way. And kind of just goes on his own, and like, I don't know if even his sixth Praxium even has like pro-Republic stamp of approval. Maybe it was, and we just don't know.
I'm sure it does, but Leia would want him more involved.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know if Luke's gonna show up and fight for Thrawn, he ain't fighting for Thrawn. He's gonna fight against Thrawn. And then obviously Republic goes kablooey. And now Rey's God, I don't know what Rey's gonna do, because her story's gonna take 15 years after the Rise of Skywalker. So who knows how much time has passed since then. So yeah, there is the overly summarized history of the Jedi and the Republic. And in terms of just kind of a look back, it's complicated, it's weird, it kind of is a little bit of haphazard when you have to include legend stuff and then the Republic stuff and all that. So, and then the canon stuff. So it's kind of like, I don't know if we have like a really good sense yet. But it's interesting. It's interesting that these warrior monks decide this is the government we're going to protect. Yoda himself has gone on about, like, in Revenge of the novelization,
Mhm.
how it's a moral. Their thing is moral thing, and then George has gone on about we're not. They're not policymakers. They are ambassadors. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. These two organizations decide, we're gonna come together because that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, it seems to me, first of all, just talking about the Legends history after Endor, strange kind of how it just wandered without the goal of Order 66. And I mean, a lot of this written before that.
Well, I
Without,
mean, there was a Jedi purge.
but like without an end point in sight, that they're free to do whatever they want. It does like these rapid shifts. It's more almost more realistic. Maybe I don't know. It's just
Um,
I don't know. It's just all over. It's kind of weird and all over the place. I don't mind it. It's just kind of odd. I hope with Ray, with Luke, and then with Ray, they're able to really think more deeply about who Ray is as a character, first of all, and who Finn is as a character.
who shows
What
up in the movie? Period.
who shows up, what the state of the galaxy. That's another different thing that canon and legends diverge greatly. I mean, the destruction of Hosnian Prime. The effect of the First Order is just to wipe everything clean. The Final Order, wipe everything clean.
Because
You know,
Palpatine's a petty, petty man.
well, that too. But there is no Republic anymore, really, for the Jedi to cooperate. It is going to be a lot more localized. Now, maybe there is some sort of localization, but yeah, it'll be, it'll be interesting. I mean, what I find maybe curious to see is if Ray does have some more of a sense of like the High Republic, but in a different, very different circumstance, a much smaller scale. In that she's doing her thing, she's leading this group of folks, trying to be the conscience of whoever they encounter, the contemplative core of whatever society they're a part of. That ends up developing into a productive cooperation. Um, I mean, we see Ray as part of the resistance. We see her training with Leia. Yeah, it's. I mean, it also depends on what the authors, the writers of the story think. The screenwriters and
What
whatnot.
Sharimo Bay Chinoy and Stephen Knightley all
Yeah,
think,
what
and
what do they
the
think about
powers
the
that
division
be.
between uh, you know religious institutions and societies and government institutions,
Can I read a
spiritual
Mon Mothma quote
authority?
for you when you?
Yeah,
I love to read this Mon Mothma quote. This is from a Star Wars Legends book from the '90s. And Mon Mothma, I think, is talking to Luke and like her views on the Jedi at the time.
right.
Um,
And this will
eh,
be kind of instructive for the whole what happens next kind of thing.
yeah. This is, but also, yeah, but yes, I actually do think so. This is what Mon Mothma has to say. I believe strongly that the Republic needs Jedi that get their hands dirty and are part of Republic daily life. Jedi that live in ivory towers might be more dangerous than not no Jedi at all. You need to look no further than our recent history to see that it has been the Dark Jedi that have sought isolation. To be a Jedi of the Light, a Jedi must be one with the people. There must be Jedi on every planet, a Jedi in every city, not a few planets full of Jedi and nothing else. There must be Jedi doing what ordinary folk do, Jedi who are ordinary folk. There must be Jedi doctors and judges and soldiers and pilots and politicians.
Interesting. That is,
Uh,
I mean, to get another real world parallel here,
mhm,
Pope Francis speaks about priests needing to smell like the sheep, needing
mhm.
to be of the people and among the people, in order to actually be to connect with the people and you know show. Here's a funny word to love, and love is about being with and constancy with through struggle, through joy and celebration. You know that is how the Jedi can actually preserve light and life and show what the will of the Force is for the preserving of life,
Mhm.
and for people to actually trust them and to know that they're there. They're actually able to grasp the complexities of whatever's going uh, on the ground. I think someone like Ray is capable of doing that. She's going to be in that and part of that. Jedi doctors and politicians as part of society. Yeah, maybe I don't
I
know.
mean, that was the night. So here's the thing. Here's the thing, though, about the Jedi, especially in those '90s Legends books, because we
Yeah.
didn't have the prequels, and this could be a whole other topic that hopefully we might get a guest for later. Um, because we didn't know like where did Jedi come from and like how do you train Jedi and whatnot.
Yeah.
Luke's Jedi Order had a very what some of the fans have always called blue collar working Jedi. Like these, just they're not trained at birth. It's like some like Kyle Katarn, not the podcast of the actual character. He was a smuggler mercenary dude who then realized his dad was a Jedi, and then he decided, what, I'm gonna take on the Jedi life. But sort of like
Mm.
even when he got more into the Jedi lifestyle, he still kind of had that rugged Han Solo-ish kind of vibe. But just now he's training Padawans. And it's like Luke's Jedi, where that's very kind of like we're Jedi, we do Jedi things, but we all have very diverse backgrounds. Like I was raised as a pilot, and I'm a smuggler. I was just a farm boy. All kind of these um very diverse backgrounds, which is actually kind of funny compared to the Jedi Order we kind of see in, or at least I don't
Yeah.
know, in canon, because
Yep.
at least from what little I remember of what George's own saying was, George was pretty cool with the whole we need Jedi babies and we got to do it the prequel method, which is interesting to say the least. He was kind of more for that, at least in his interviews and
Yeah.
kind of his views of things.
I mean that
Uh,
it did end up with them in the ivory tower, though, and that's the thing.
that's the thing about George, is that I don't think he thinks that this is a problem of how we of the Jedi baby thing.
Which
Now I do think now that George is gone, I don't think they're going to go that way. I think they are going to go for the.
something doesn't mean we have to agree. So,
Oh no, I know, I
on
know.
YouTube, the Star Wars YouTube guys,
Oh,
just because Lucas believes something.
oh no, I agreed. Well, and I also think I mean, just looking at who are kind of the biggest Jedi in the current canon. Look at Caden Jarrus. Dude has pretty much a wife and family
Yeah.
and a literal son. I would not be surprised if Jason Syndulla, about to see Jason Solo, Jason Syndulla is going to be set up to be a Jedi one day,
Yeah.
and he's not a baby. He's been with his mom. He's what 10 years, 9 years, 10 years old at this point.
Being in the
He
Republic military hierarchy.
he
Right?
has that attachment to his mom. He's been raised pretty normally for a kid. And I just think to kind of give, I just think also just from kind of the cynical standpoint, to give Jedi, I think people want Jedi who feel normal in this, and to use that real world
That's not
kind of,
cynical. Believe me.
to use that real world parallel, you know, do I trust the Catholic bishop in the fancy robe, or do I want to trust the priest who I can feel like I can share a beer with, and we can watch the wrestling and talk maybe some sinful stuff? You know what I'm saying? It's like we're not going to be all Mr. I don't know. Have you ever seen the show? I'm a small tangent, but this had the point. Have you ever seen the show MASH? Have you seen MASH?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
One of the characters is Father Mokei, and one of the things we love about Father Mokei is he's a Catholic priest. But he's also like a boxer, and he joins with the gang, and he kind of plays in tricks. So it's like he feels like a normal guy. He just happens to be a priest.
People who seem like real human beings.
Yes, and I do think, in terms of just what Disney probably wants from a cynical marketing ploy, but also maybe in terms of like the actual story itself, they are going to maybe go to that '90s Legends Luke of like you feel like real people who aren't like there's no like a council and stuff. They just feel like they're Jedi and they all live together maybe, but they kind of do real things.
I mean, they kind of have to have some sort of decision making body, but
I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe they're small enough to all be just one singular vote.
Yeah.
And, some of that Legend stuff obviously is, of course, they worked for a whole decade, both back and forth of no prequels, and then when the prequels come along, they tried to morph Luke's Jedi Academy to look more like the prequel Jedi. And even the old Republic Jedi start to look a little bit more like the prequel Jedi. Like there's the Jedi Council now and stuff like that. They're a little bit more of a centralized force. They all wear the same Obi-Wan style robes. So there's that. So there's that kind of behind the scenes thing. But yeah, I do wonder if both Rey's order will resemble that '90s Luke order of kind of the more grungy.
Yeah.
I mean, just grungy in terms of like we're all wearing black and leather, but just kind of that more, Rey's kind of like not gonna just find Jedi babies like, hey, you got Force powers? Why don't you join a Force Academy? I need some people to help me.
Yeah.
Cool. We're all kind of, even though like they spent 20 years as pilot with a family or stuff, or they have wife and kids.
This is getting me to think, one of the reasons why the High Republic Jedi are still more compelling and more trusted in the galaxy. At the very least, there's a sense that Padawans should go and explore life. They should, there's one of the short stories in Tales of Light and Life is about Amadeo Azazel, who's a new Padawan that we see in Phase 3. And he goes to Coruscant for the first time. This is basically me going to New York for the first time a few weeks ago. He goes to Coruscant for the first time, and he gets lost. He gets into a bar fight. He meets a girl. It's always, you have Lula and Zine. Lula being a Padawan.
Mm-hmm.
They have this relationship with someone. Zine isn't even a Jedi. Hasn't grown up as a Jedi. So they are able to explore more, and that gets encouraged during the High Republic era, or at least in this time period. Yeah, I mean, there's a profound point of wherever you're at. Obi-Wan has Dex, right?
Right.
There's still.
That's why it's one of the best scenes in Clone Wars.
Yeah.
And I mean that literally too. It's one
And
of my favorites.
why we as viewers are able to trust Obi-Wan more, I think, in part because not just because we saw him in 1977 in Attack of the Clones, we see him, we're following him in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Part because someone like Dex trusts him.
I'll say this as well. That always makes characters like Yoda so interesting because, like, on the one hand, I feel like sometimes they can write Yoda like living too much in that ivory tower, but I can also see Yoda going to Dex's diner, just hanging out. Like, Yoda seems to always like. I love it when Yoda gets mischievous. Like, mischievous Yoda is the best Yoda because, like, he's just not sitting in the being just say wise words and then go away. Like, he's being mischievous. He's hanging out with the kids, or it's like he's playing the pranks too.
Yeah.
It's like,
especially Yoda with kids. Obi-Wan, throughout Clone Wars, like that whole arc where he goes undercover. I mean, he's way more mischievous, way more relatable than the polished exterior we think he is.
Right.
Yeah, it's very fascinating.
But I realized we went a little off topic. To kind of revert back, let's do the future.
Not really. I don't think we're off topic at all, frankly. I think that's part of the answer is how are the Jedi supposed to relate to the Republic in a more human way?
Right. And, it's interesting with Luke and Rey, them, in a certain... I do wonder what their feelings of the Republic will be, because really the only real connection they have to a Republic is through Leia.
Yeah.
Leia is very... I mean, although by the end, Leia is kind of got over the Republic. It's like, I gotta form this military to fight the First Order, and I'm not getting any help from the Republic. Yes. Luke, through Leia, his sister, is probably like the one of the few good things of like, Leia would probably talk about what her father said, like, oh, the Republic was like this, and like that's probably why Luke maybe be a little bit more loyal to it. Obi-Wan lived in the Republic. Rey, on the other hand, like Rey lived in Jakku. No, nothing Jakku. Jakku ever touched the Republic? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Leia
would have known Bale and Brad talking about the Republic.
Yeah, but I don't know what kind of like, I don't know if like Leia during her training of Rey, told her stories of the Republic during their time together. I would like to hope so. But again, it's sort of like, what are Rey's priorities right now? I mean, maybe, although to be fair, she has Poe and Rose, and I do think Poe. I am, and I say this with all seriousness. I would not be shocked if one day it's like going to the Chancellor's office and just sitting there as Poe Dameron. He gets Captain Kirk and becomes an admiral.
Yeah, why not? I mean,
that was Leia's dream for him.
Yeah, he was Leia's protege.
Yeah, that was that's the thing about Poe that I really like about Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker novel brings in a lot is although I think the movie does a pretty decent job as well. Like Poe is not Han Solo, he's not the hotshot pilot. Leia sees Poe as like, no, you are a leader. You are going to be diplomat, general, all in one. You can be the chancellor if you put your mind to it. You're better than that, Poe. You got more brain up here. Um, so uh, so maybe that's her connection to the Republic. If there is a galactic organization out there at all.
I mean, that's what's nice about the lack of scale, the smaller scale, is that those personal connections are more meaningful.
Yeah, and if again, even if this is kind of the more liberally kind of way of viewing it, it's like, well, the Republic's good now because you got Poe Dameron in the Chancellor chair, and Rey's in the Jedi Grand Master chair, and Rose she is the Defense Minister chair. So
it's the end of Game of Thrones, right? With the
yeah, you got all the good people in charge.
Finally.
You got all the smart, competent people in charge. It's like it's like it's not that revolution. You're not really that, but at the same time, it's Star Wars fantasy. So, so I don't want to get into it that much. We've been here for 2 hours, but if there is to be a Jedi Republic relationship, it's because all of Rey's pals are now kind of in charge. Kind of like how, in a lot of ways, Luke's pals were in charge. That's kind of the reason why Luke kept in touch with the Republic. It's not like he's gonna join another faction because Leia's there, Han's there, Mon Mothma's there. I mean, Mon and Luke are not like buddy, but Luke looks up to Mon.
And Ahsoka are
Akbar's there.
There's some connection, Mon, Hera, Ahsoka. There's some cahoots going on with this show.
I mean,
in another galaxy right now, but yeah.
I mean, I guess we can talk a little about Ahsoka. Now, we have that is our kind of closest Jedi Republic connection now. Sure. It's like Ahsoka's still allied with the Republic. She's not. There might not be an official Jedi Order that Republic sanctions or approves or funds or whatever. But when Ahsoka is doing her investigation, she brings along Hera because Hera's a Republic general, and Hera's like, yeah, this Jedi here is here with me on a public business, and Mon Mothma also is like, okay, cool, I trust the Jedi, so I trust Ahsoka. Yeah, Leia's like, yeah, we trust this Jedi to do so that even in a kind of de facto way that connection still remains.
I mean, all of this to say, there's a lot we got to wrap up, but to say, it's as if Star Wars is a character-driven story. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, and I love talking about institutions and large scale. And that's what I love about High Republic is it's so many of these characters together making for an institutional picture of these institutions that are just groups of people with their roles and their rules and regulations, but also responsibilities and their sense of responsibility personally for the galaxy. So yeah, to see that with Ahsoka and with Luke and with Rey, to continue that. Curious to see if they. I trust the creatives to be asking these questions, but I think they're going to get into it with character-driven focus, like the Luminous authors all have. Right. I mean, that's the thing that they'll tell you is, yeah, there are these institutional questions. What do the Jedi fear? What do the Jedi hope for? That's a personal question too. So,
I mean, yeah, I'll be very curious to see if in a few years, hopefully, cross your fingers, Strike and all didn't affect it. Where are we gonna see Rey, get up at her academy? And then there's one scene where Rey needs to go to a Senate panel and Poe Dameron's in the big chair with the hammer. I don't know. I hope so. That'd be cool. But yeah, it is kind of that character driven where it's like if the powers that be are not your friends, then what are they? It's like they're either neutral or your enemies.
Maybe that's also the fantasy story element to it, right? Is being more personal focused. That may not be perfectly realistic, but
yeah. But with that kind of answer, I guess that's all. Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I think that's what we've got so far, and that's the thing is what we have in the sequel trilogy is a very character-driven story. At least The Lost Jedi, especially being very character-driven, and Rey. I mean, Rey being. That's the funny thing about the sequel trilogy. The best thing about the sequel trilogy is that its main character is the best character. Yep. The best thing you can say is Rey is actually really interesting, and where she goes, we want to know. We care about where she goes. So,
me too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fun times. All right, I think that does it for tonight. Yeah, we kind of did. We did whole swath of thousands of years of history. Blowing
Thousands of
through.
years in 2 hours. That's
A
good.
very convoluted, complex topic that we don't have clear answers for, but I think we got to kind of different ideas. Very classic EOC deep dive. Thanks everyone for joining us this week. Let us know what you thought of our conversation. What do you think the Jedi Republic relationship should be? How do you think it's being characterized in legends and in canon stories in the High Republic, etc.? In Old Republic, New Republic. Yeah, in your favorite story. Let me know what you thought about Ahsoka. Let us know down below in the comments. Give this video a like, a share, subscribe to the Star Wars Underworld YouTube network, YouTube channel. Of course, the flagship is going to be back at 9 p.m. on Thursday. No tractor beam this week, but we will be back next week, 5:30 Pacific,
Sad.
8:30 Eastern. Yeah, let's get back to plugs here. Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID2021 on Twitter. Again, JID2021 on Twitter. And of course, at the Ion Cannon Pod on Twitter. But mostly, you can find me on the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we always have lots of fun discussion about all sorts of Star Wars topics and more.
That's right. That's Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANPOD. Find me on Twitter, NEUG485, Instagram and Threads, MNEUG1138. And yeah, at Ion Cannon Pod, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads as well. At the SW, check the flagship there. Check out Dom's San Diego Comic Con interview. That was a really great interview that he did a few months ago, but still a lot to chew on as Phase 3 begins. Next week, we are talking about Ahsoka.
We're letting it out. We're letting it out.
Letting it all out. I think we're also going to focus a bit on masters and teams of masters and apprentices. Different things, different ideas. We'll see what we cook up. There's a lot to talk about, but in true Iron Cannon fashion, we don't tend to go blow by blow with episodes. The flagship is. They are definitely going as Dom mentioned on the flagship. They're doing their episode breakdown, so check that out. With the good old podcast here. Yeah, I don't say that because I mind it. I say that because it's fun. Yeah, but until then, let's blow this thing and head home.